The conversation around the Las Vegas Raiders has taken a fascinating turn, and it all circles back to one central idea. If this franchise is truly serious about resetting its future, every major decision needs to orbit around the quarterback they're preparing to make the face of the organization. There is a growing belief that the Raiders are positioning themselves to select Fernando Mendoza with the first overall pick. And once that possibility enters the picture, the coaching discussion changes entirely. This is no longer just about finding a head coach with experience or pedigree. This becomes about alignment, development, and long-term vision, and that is why the name Curt Signetti continues to surface in these conversations. To be clear, the idea of Signetti leaving Indiana does not feel realistic on the surface. He has stability, control, and institutional support that most coaches dream of. His contract situation alone suggests security for years, and his age only reinforces the idea that he could finish his career exactly where he is. This is not about assuming he is available or even interested. This is about recognizing that when you hold the first overall pick and you believe that quarterback can define your next decade, you owe it to the organization to explore every possible edge. Ignoring the coach who helped unlock the best version of that quarterback would feel negligent. What makes this situation compelling is not just Signetti's resume, but his direct connection to Mendoza's development. Quarterbacks do not simply arrive as finished products. They evolve through structure, trust, and a system that understands their strengths and limitations. Mendoza's growth has been noticeable when you study his progression, not just statistically, but in the way he processes the game, handles pressure, and elevates in critical moments. That growth did not happen by accident. It happened under a staff that clearly understood how to shape him, challenge him, and protect him at the same time. If the Raiders are convinced Mendoza is their future, then understanding how he was coached matters just as much as scouting his arm talent or athletic profile. This is where the logic of at least sitting down with Signetti becomes impossible to dismiss. Even if the conversation never turns into a formal interview, even if it is nothing more than an extended football discussion, the value is immense. Learning what Mendoza responds to, how he prepares, how he absorbs information, and how he is pushed to improve could influence every subsequent coaching hire and offensive decision the Raiders make. This is not about hiring a coach simply because he worked with a quarterback in college. That approach fails when the philosophy does not translate to the professional level. The difference here is that Signetti's reputation is built on adaptability and program transformation. Everywhere he has gone, the culture has shifted. Teams have become more disciplined, more competitive, and more mentally resilient. That kind of impact speaks to teaching and leadership, not just scheme. When evaluating head coaching candidates, the Raiders cannot afford to think in isolation. The next head coach either has to be the perfect fit for Mendoza or must be capable of bringing in an offensive structure that maximizes him. Anything less risks repeating the same cycle this franchise has been trapped in for years. Talent without direction, potential without cohesion. A quarterback asked to adapt to instability rather than being supported by consistency. One of the most revealing aspects of Signetti's coaching style is how he speaks about quarterback development. He does not romanticize raw talent. He emphasizes timing, rhythm, processing, and preparation. Those are the traits that separate quarterbacks who survive in the league from those who thrive. Mendoza's improvement in these areas is evident on tape, and it reinforces the idea that his ceiling is not defined solely by physical tools, but by how well his mind engages with the game. This matters because the Raiders are not drafting a quarterback into a vacuum. They're drafting him into a market, a fan base, and a franchise that is desperate for stability under center. Pressure will be immediate. Expectations will be relentless. The wrong coaching environment could stunt development before it truly begins. That is why understanding the environment that allowed Mendoza to become his best version is critical. There is also something symbolic about the connection between Signetti's teams and the identity the Raiders have historically embraced. When Mendoza refers to his teammates as misfits, it resonates deeply with the culture that once defined the silver and black. Teams that win not because they're the most polished, but because they are unified, disciplined, and fearless. That kind of synergy cannot be manufactured overnight, but it can be cultivated by the right leadership. From a purely strategic standpoint, the Raiders have already shown a willingness to explore a wide range of coaching profiles. Young minds, experienced coordinators, former head coaches, and established leaders have all been discussed. If the net is already being cast this wide, excluding the coach most closely tied to the potential franchise quarterback feels contradictory. Even if the outcome never changes, the process matters. Ultimately, this conversation is not about headlines or speculation. It is about responsibility. Holding the first overall pick comes with an obligation to do exhaustive work. That means asking difficult questions, challenging assumptions, and seeking insight wherever it exists. Curt Signetti represents insight. Insight into Fernando Mendoza, into quarterback development, and into building a culture that maximizes what a team has rather than lamenting what it lacks. The Raiders have an opportunity to reset the trajectory of the franchise in a way that feels intentional rather than reactionary. That starts by acknowledging that the quarterback decision and the coaching decision are inseparable. If Mendoza is truly the guy, then every path that leads to helping him succeed deserves to be explored, no matter how unlikely or uncomfortable it may initially seem. When you zoom out and look at the broader landscape of college and professional football, what makes this discussion even more intriguing is the sheer consistency of Curt Signetti's impact wherever he has coached. This is not a case of one breakout season or a single lucky run. His teams have shown structure, discipline, and clarity of purpose across multiple programs, regardless of talent level. That speaks to a coach who understands how to build systems that elevate players rather than relying solely on recruiting advantages or raw athleticism. For an NFL franchise searching for identity, that trait alone carries enormous weight. Indiana's transformation under his leadership did not happen because the roster suddenly became the most talented in the country. It happened because players understood their roles, executed with confidence, and trusted the process. That is exactly the type of environment a young quarterback needs when stepping into the most demanding position in professional sports. The jump from college to the NFL is brutal, especially mentally. The schemes are faster, the windows are smaller, and the margin for error disappears almost instantly. A quarterback who has already been trained to think the game at high level has a fighting chance to survive that transition. Fernando Mendoza's appeal goes far beyond arm strength or mobility. What consistently stands out is how he responds when the moment gets heavy. Late drives, hostile environments, tight situations where one mistake can flip a game, those are the moments that define quarterbacks. Mendoza has shown a calm and competitiveness that does not always show up on a stat sheet. Those traits are cultivated through preparation and trust, and that points back again to the coaching he received. This is why the Raiders cannot afford to evaluate coaching candidates in isolation from their quarterback plan. Too often, franchises treat these decisions as separate timelines. They draft a quarterback and then hope the coach fits, or they hire a coach and later force a quarterback into a system that does not suit him. That approach creates friction from day one. If the Raiders truly want to break that cycle, the next coaching hire must be made with Mendoza's development at the center of every conversation. There is also the reality that the Raiders are not operating from a place of patience among the fan base. Years of instability have created an environment where immediate improvement is expected, even if long-term rebuilding is necessary. That pressure inevitably lands on the quarterback first. A coaching staff that understands how to shield a young quarterback from unnecessary chaos while still demanding accountability becomes essential. Signetti's track record suggests he understands that balance. Another element that cannot be ignored is how modern football increasingly rewards adaptability. Defenses adjust weekly. Trends shift rapidly. Coaches who are rigid in philosophy often fall behind. One of the reasons Signetti's teams have remained competitive is his willingness to evolve his approach based on personnel. That flexibility is exactly what an NFL head coach needs, especially when building around a quarterback whose game can expand over time rather than being boxed into a static identity. The Raiders are also at a point where culture matters just as much as play design. Losing organizations often underestimate how deeply habits and expectations become ingrained. Changing that requires more than slogans or short-term motivation. It requires daily standards, consistency in messaging, and a clear vision of what winning football looks like. Coaches who have rebuilt programs from the ground up understand this better than anyone. They know that transformation is not glamorous, but it is sustainable. From the Raiders' perspective, even initiating a conversation with Signetti sends a message internally. It tells players, coaches, and fans that the organization is willing to think creatively and aggressively about its future. It signals that the franchise is no longer content with safe or conventional choices. That alone can shift perception and energy around the team, which matters more than many realize. There's also a strategic advantage in simply listening. Even if Signetti never leaves college football, gaining insight into how he evaluates quarterbacks, structures offenses, and manages development could influence how the Raiders build their staff and roster. Those lessons do not disappear just because a hire does not materialize. Information is power, especially when you're trying to maximize a first overall pick. The spotlight on Mendoza will only intensify as his biggest games approach. Road environments, championship stakes, and national attention all serve as stress tests. How he handles those moments will shape the narrative around him, fairly or not. The Raiders should be watching closely, not just for the outcome, but for how he responds to adversity, pressure, and expectation. Those moments often reveal more than an entire season of tape. What makes this situation unique is that the Raiders are not simply evaluating a prospect, they're potentially evaluating a partnership. Quarterback and head coach, vision and execution, patience and urgency. Getting that equation right can alter the direction of a franchise for a decade. Getting it wrong can set it back just as long. As the coaching search continues and names continue to circulate, the central question should remain unchanged. Who gives Fernando Mendoza the best chance to become the best version of himself at the professional level? Every interview, every discussion, every evaluation should be filtered through that lens. If that process leads the Raiders to challenge assumptions, take risks, and explore unconventional paths, then that is exactly what this moment demands, because the opportunity in front of them is rare, and how they respond to it will define everything that comes next. Beyond just the X's and O's, the Raiders have to consider the intangible qualities that make a quarterback thrive in the NFL. Mendoza's leadership, his ability to process complex defenses, and his mental toughness all stem from the environment he has been nurtured in. Coaches like Signetti don't just develop physical skills. They cultivate mindset, confidence, and resilience. These traits are the difference between a quarterback who survives his rookie season and one who carries a franchise for years. Ignoring that insight would be a missed opportunity for an organization on the cusp of a potential turning point. Additionally, the connection between quarterback and head coach sets the tone for the entire roster. When a leader establishes trust, clarity, and accountability, it resonates across all positions. The Raiders cannot afford to bring in a quarterback like Mendoza and then surround him with a coaching staff that lacks alignment or vision. Every hire, every coordinator, every position coach needs to reinforce the same culture and strategy. A conversation with Signetti, even if informal, could provide a blueprint for creating an environment that maximizes talent and minimizes growing pains. Before we continue, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give this video a like. Your support helps us keep bringing you the latest updates on our Las Vegas Raiders. And don't be shy. Drop your thoughts on the news in the comments below. In a shocking turn of events that has sent ripples through the NFL, Raiders standout defensive end Maxx Crosby is reportedly requesting an immediate trade following the abrupt departure of head coach Carroll. Sources close to the player suggest that Crosby is frustrated with the franchise's apparent lack of direction, going so far as to say, "This team has no vision." The timing of the request has raised eyebrows, coming on the heels of Carroll's exit, which has left the Raiders scrambling to stabilize a locker room already brimming with uncertainty. Crosby, widely regarded as one of the league's most disruptive pass rushers, has long been a cornerstone of the Raiders' defense, making his public dissatisfaction a major talking point among analysts and fans alike. Insiders indicate that the defensive star's patience may have finally run out after repeated organizational upheavals and inconsistent leadership at the coaching level. The veteran's bold stance is seen by some as a reflection of a larger issue within the franchise, a perceived inability to cultivate stability and a winning culture in Las Vegas. While it remains unclear which teams may have already expressed interest in Crosby, speculation is rampant. Rumors point to multiple contenders seeking to bolster their pass rush ahead of the next season, and a trade involving the talented defensive end could shift the balance of power in several conferences. Executives familiar with the situation suggest that while the Raiders could attempt to persuade Crosby to stay, his ultimatum appears serious, with the player reportedly unwilling to return under interim or replacement leadership that he does not trust. The news has sparked immediate reactions on social media, with fans debating whether the franchise can retain its marquee talent or if this marks the beginning of a significant roster overhaul. Meanwhile, betting lines and fantasy projections are quietly adjusting to the possibility that one of the league's premier defensive talents could soon be wearing a different uniform. If Crosby's demand is honored, it may set a precedent for player power in Las Vegas, highlighting the delicate balance between superstar influence and organizational authority. As the NFL world watches closely, one thing is certain. Maxx Crosby's public call for a trade has intensified the uncertainty surrounding the Raiders' future, leaving questions about leadership, team culture, and long-term strategy hanging in the air. That's it for this update. If you enjoyed the video and want to stay updated with exclusive news about our Las Vegas Raiders, be sure to subscribe to our channel and hit that like button. We can't wait to hear your thoughts in the comments. See you in the next video.